life is full of resistance. When you have kids, it's an interruption to a really fun time. And then when those kids start to grow, there's more interruptions. And our tradition and our mindset, our theology, a lot of things gets in our way of understanding what really the simplistic way we can approach things in life.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome back to Give a Heck, where we encourage you to live life on purpose and not by accident. I'm your host, Dwight Heck. In 1972, Larry Onan was handed a note, no fanfare, just 8 simple words. Go for it. You have the freedom to fail. That scribbled challenge became the catalyst for a legacy of radical stewardship and billion-dollar impact. Larry just didn't answer the call. He amplified it with over 40 years coaching ministries, authoring transformative books, and helping leaders unlock biblical generosity. Larry redefined what living and giving with purpose really looks like. Today, he shares one quiet moment sparked a movement that changes lives and missions across the world. Good afternoon, Larry. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Dwight. Thank you for the invite to be a part of your show today.
Yes, thank you for accepting and coming on. I look forward to unpacking the journey of your life and all the pivotal moments that have impacted both your life, but because it's impacted your life, it's also spread and caused you to be a service of others. And that's one of the biggest reasons that drove me to look at your application, right? I get so many a week, most people would be floored how many people want to be on my show, but it has to be something that hits heart-centered to me and my core values of faith, family, and work, right? So I really appreciated the reach out, and I'm just shocked we were able to book this soon, to be honest with you, because sometimes when I tell people, oh yeah, come on the show, they book 3-4 months out when there's so many openings prior. So I'm blessed that you were able to, squeeze me into your schedule so that you can share with the Give a Heck listeners and viewers about what you've done. I thought it was just amazing reading through. Obviously it's just snippets of your life, going through website, going through different things in social media. But, it interests me always, as I mentioned, what a person's origin is. So I'd like to rewind a little bit to talk about your origin, for your earliest recollections to where you are today, whatever you're willing to share. Obviously, as well as I do, being in a ministry, the more that we are vulnerable and heart-centric to people, the more they connect with us and the more that the message resonates with them. So please, Larry, if you could, what shaped your perspective growing up? What made Larry who Larry is today?
Well, Dwight, even though I live in Southern California, I did not start here. I'm a kid from Western Colorado. My father was a church planter. I was born in 1944 when Auschwitz was still very much alive. It was at the end of World War II. And I came on the scenes into a bustling community, a post-World War community where Dad was starting a church. He also was bivocational, so he had a full-time job as a sign painter, outdoor advertising. And I was raised in a culture of protection in some ways. It was post World War II. It was not knowing any better how you do things. There was no television in my hometown for until I was about 9 or 10 years of age. Uh, that kept me busy with my mom, and she liked to read to me. She liked to sing with me, and she had me memorize scripture verses. So my television commercials were of a very different variety. I thought it was really good to go to Denver, Colorado, and see one television and one channel back in those days. But I was born in that environment, and I think a lot of times preachers' kids either rebel and create headache for their parents. I didn't do that. I felt my dad's occupation was like everybody else's. Maybe it was because he also had another business going on. But I discovered probably in my junior high years of time that there was a thing called the theater. And I was invited to be in a couple of different shows. And that really put me on a trajectory that I thought surely by the time I was a junior at the University of Colorado, I knew I was heading for either New York or I was heading to Hollywood. I was really attracted to the directing side of the theater more than the acting, although I'd been in gobs and gobs of shows. But I could just see myself doing that, and that whole skill package was there. So I was a theater major. I had no plans to ever get into the business side, into a ministry side. In fact, I promised God a long time ago I would never get into that hectic world of, growing a church or doing those kind of things. I saw the underbelly of what that was all about, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So in my theater journey, I knew what I was going to do, and then I had some radical changes hit me in my junior year in college, where things started to really change pretty dramatically. But up till then, that's what it was. I wanted to learn the craft, do the craft, and be the craft of theater arts. And actually, I escaped from college in the middle of all that chaos because I changed my major. And I ended up, in terms of what the University of Colorado thought I would be, as a speech, English, drama coach for secondary education, which I never did either. So I was certified and never taught more than my student teaching years in college. And, probably the college school of education thought they were raising up somebody to take on another campus someplace. And soon after that, I left Colorado and ended up in California. And the journey goes in a different direction from those early days. But yes, that's in a nutshell what I was. I was a confused kid in some ways, but I also was pretty reinforced and affirmed by my dad, and had a younger brother as well. We've done a number of things together over the years. But that was a time of my religious background was an awful lot of doing things. I had to perform well to prove that I was holy enough to be a good Christian kid. And that got kind of old after the while, because sometimes the performance was overbearing and it was very little spiritual growth, but it was an awful lot of performance that made up what I saw to be, quote, Christianity at the time. And by the time I was a junior, that was a low priority, and theater was eating my lunch, so to speak. And very happy doing it, but not in the direction that I thought my dad would want me to go at that time anyway.
Yeah, it goes to show
It's a long
how
story in a nutshell.
well, and that's a great story. It just goes to show how, as individuals, as we're growing up, the learned behaviors and the belief systems and patterns that we process and continue to project to others as we age is a cycle effect. It's a hamster wheel. Goes from generation to generation, and somewhere along the line, somebody will decide to break that generational pattern of the sameness. And I'm not saying that sameness can't be good, but it is so unfortunate, though, when I look back at me growing up with Christianity, and I'm still a practicing Catholic Christian, but I treat it like a buffet. And what I mean by that is there's things I don't like within Christianity that I believe are man-induced, right? Humankind induced.
Yeah.
They were not the message of Jesus and of God. So I treat it like a buffet. And and I enjoy my faith because of it. I don't enjoy my faith because of other people's expectations of what I need to do within my faith, if that makes sense, right? And it's especially
Yes.
prevalent when we're younger, isn't it? Like our families, like you said, your dad had specific things. He was very supportive of you, but you also were, here's a hallway. You can't go outside those walls. This is what your life is. And as we get older and we get experience, you had the one channel, right? I can respect that. Growing up in rural Alberta until I was, oh my goodness, it probably wasn't until the middle 70s, later 70s, till we had anything more than just the rabbit ears or the antenna on top of the house to get
I
shows and
remember the
stuff,
first
right?
rabbit ears. That was exciting to have rabbit ears because you could actually move them around and get a better picture out of it.
And then
Dwight, it
we
was
and then we were told that if you put foil on them and you curved it certain ways, it would help, and it sure did. We
it sure
tried,
did.
we tried everything. My point for all of
Well,
this is that, oh, go ahead. You
yeah,
first.
well, Dwight, what I think a lot of times happens is we think most people kind of look at life as a straight line. In other words, between where you're at and where I'm at, we would take a pencil and we'd say Los Angeles is down here and Alberta's up here and Edmonton's there. So I draw a straight line and call that the journey. Well, there's many twists and turns in that journey, and it's the road curves all over the place. And if you're not really giving attention to the road, you can go off the road and have a mess on your hands.
Oh
And it
yeah.
never is a straight line. And I think what I thought in my early years is the straight line was I'll go on into theater, I'll do this, I'll end up in Broadway or I'll end up in Hollywood, and life will be great. Well, the twists and the turns of life over and over and over again have kept me. In fact, if anything grew my faith, it was the unexpected and how that took me in a different
Oh
direction each
wow.
time.
I love that.
And I think a lot of times people think, okay, let's just illustrate it this way. They think they want to go someplace. So if I made a decision today in my home to drive to Alberta and up to your place, I would have to go a little bit east and a long ways north. But if I decided I was going to go to Dallas, Texas, I would sure not take the same road because I would get on an Interstate 10 and head east and never vary out of Interstate 10 as I headed across for 2.5 days of driving in a different direction. And I think a lot of times people's confusion is they don't know where they're heading. So they end up in places they never planned on being. And because they were just wandering around out there, I think so many people live life like they're playing in a bumper car game at a carnival. And a bumper car is just where you try to smash the other person by who's coming behind you or front of you. But there is no north. It is just confusion and chaos for about 5 minutes. And I think rather than 5 minutes, life becomes a journey of what in the world am I doing here? Where am I going? What is it all about? I need to change wives. I need to change kids. I need to change jobs. And it's maybe oopses, those changed on you. So there's even bigger surprises. What you think is going to happen doesn't happen. And what you were sure you were going to avoid probably is what you ended up running right into. So, life has taught me those things by experience because I really, as a theater major, as an illustration, I never saw myself doing 35 years of fund development consulting and business. I was doing something very different in my planning and even didn't take classes to be in business because I was into theater arts. Well, I probably would go back and say if I did it over, I would probably take more business classes because I used a lot more business expertise over the years than I did some of the stuff that I had to take. But I think life is a surprise to people. I have a grandson that's 19 and another one that's 22, and they're looking at life and it's not, they're just into college or out of college. And I told them a few weeks ago, I said, you're going to make 5 to 6 major changes in your life that you're not going to expect. And it will not be, you won't be doing 30 years from now what you think you're going to be doing right now, 30 years from now, because life will probably take you in a different direction and you will be very fulfilled, but don't be surprised when you start feeling the changes that are going to occur. And I felt them myself. That's what life was for me was, oops, oh, how interesting. I never expected that.
But
Uh, I
how
joke.
many people have that oops experience and really they miss it because they have a lack of self-awareness, right? They literally are living on that hamster wheel in the valley of despair one moment, high another, and they have no consistency because of lack of awareness of what opportunities they have.
Well, and I think it's a lot of times, Dwight, because people don't know who they are and where they're supposed to be going. And if you can't solve that question of who you are and where you're going, then the hamster wheel becomes your life. And you don't even know how you ended up with kids. You don't know how you ended up with what you're doing. And so that brings about despair. It brings confusion. It brings frustration. And I think of a young guy that I met some years ago in Ohio, uh, probably 10, 15 years younger than I am, at least, maybe more than that still. Four marriages, three or four kids, different families. And he never planned it that way, but because he didn't know where he was going, it ended up that way. And it was an oops, an oops, and an oops. That's what ended up happening. And probably today he'd say, life is pretty good today, but it sure has been a confusing mess to get here. And I think many people live that way.
But
So
that confusing mess, though, really at the end of the day, if people sat when they sat in their decisions or the things that have come to them, if they'd actually sit back and think about that thought of what they're going through and where they want to go, but our society is mostly reactionary, right? So even if they do are aware of the opportunity, react to the opportunity because of lack of experience, lack of mentorship and support, or they have mentorship and support that's not focused or in their same wheelhouse of what their value systems are. And they go out and they oops, 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 right? They keep on making more and more mistakes that if they sat back and actually reflected and looked for good knowledge, guess what, people? Good knowledge is hidden in something called a book, but you have to open the cover to get it, right? You have to
yeah,
actually put some information into your brain so that you can become a critical thinker to go, here's a perfect opportunity. Now, where do I go from here? Who can I speak to verify this? Where can I get research? Instead of going through so much pain. Like I know for myself, I've gone through so many hills and valleys of pain and suffering and up and down. But I hope my kids, my 5 adult kids, my 5 grandkids, my great granddaughter, I hope for better for them. So I feel it's a responsibility for you and I to do what you did to your grandkids, to tell them that you may not be that same place, to give them that little drop of information in their brain to maybe them thinking, maybe it doesn't impact what you said to them right now, but it will impact them in the future. And they look back, they
and
look back at their
that's
grandpa
right.
and go, wow,
Yeah.
grandpa was
Dwight,
so smart.
what we have, Dwight, is a lot of people with a lot of knowledge, but not great deal of wisdom connected to the knowledge. And knowledge is just information. I mean, you can get information from AI, you can get information from books, you can get information from all kinds of studies, but the wisdom comes when you start to filter that knowledge into everyday practicality. You're listening well, you're processing well. There's a reason why they call people with gray hair elders, is they've gained something in life that gives perspective. And in my waning years, I can actually probably count to the days I won't be here anymore in the flesh anyway. I can start to say, well, that was a good run, but now it's how much more can I get done before that time comes? And the wisdom comes when you start to see things connect together and help people connect. I call it connecting the hoses, because I don't want them to go through the pain and suffering to learn it if they can learn it by some rational thinking. And I think in my life, I came into an organization. I joined an international Christian organization right out of college. I thought sure I would be doing what the core objective of the organization was. Well, I found out within a year that I had skills that they needed in a different way, even within that organization. And rather than doing what I thought I would do for the next 4 or 5 years, I ended up taking something from nothing, I would call it. It very much the same skill package that was in theater. And that's taking a book that happens to be a script and saying, how do we produce this into a full-fledged show that in 6 or 8 weeks we can invite 500 to 1,000 people to come and see it, and then we would do it again. So that was taking something from nothing and turning it. Well, in those early days, I was assigned the task of we had a music group that was coming through the area. I was working in the Northeast with Ivy League schools, based in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. And at that time, the task was, we're going to have this group for 30 days. Can you book them into this area, 5 states? And I thought, well, man, if I'm going to have to pay for them being here, which was part of the deal, I'm going to get my money's worth out of them. So I booked this group for 30 performances in 30 days. I had no thought about ever giving them a break, ever considering the travel time, ever considering anything else other than a full schedule in 5 states, with all the Ivy League schools were in there, and lots of other schools were there too. And I about killed the group because they were exhausted, because I had them traveling 4 to 6 hours every day and performing every night for 30 days.
Wow.
Well, I had a very successful run of it. We saw a lot of things happen as a result, but the group was just totally wiped out by the time they were done. And it was, two station wagons in a van type of routine. You traveled from place to place, a new motel every night or a hotel. And then they had to set up, tear down, and travel the next day. So that took me into the world. All of a sudden, a year later, I was putting more and more groups together. And I had 7 groups. I was cutting albums. I was putting all these various groups together for different audiences, from classical music to rock music to folk music, you name it was out there. And I thought, man, this is what I'm going to do. This is my executive side of directing for the rest of my life. And then I was thrown in a curve of, can you help me find 48 music groups to perform in one city for a week? And you got 9 months to pull it off. And we didn't know a single music group to invite. So then it became how do we recruit, find the people, vet the people, and get them ready for an event that happened in Dallas, Texas in 1972. Well, I got 48 groups there. And, that was a miracle in itself, because we were going from scratch and we were trying to find music that would be attractive to the teen and the 20s, not to the older folks in the Gospel Music Association of what was very common back in those days. But even thinking then, okay, I'm doing what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. No. In the middle of that event, I found out that I'd lost my job and I was now looking for a new job. And that's a whole story in itself, but it was still a real left turn in my life. And it was 90 days later before I tripped over a short-term project that ended up being the rest of my life career, because I was going to help do one thing to accomplish a big need. I thought I could do it. Let's try it. And that became the momentum that took me down the whole area of fund development consulting worldwide, not only with that organization for almost 20 years, but also another 30 years of just helping Christian nonprofits and nonprofit organizations generally work on the funding of their organization's base. So whether, whatever it was how do we generate resources, relationships, and everything else. And that was what really started to transform me. But I'm getting farther and further away from theater, but using the techniques of how you do theater in a very different environment and setting. So yeah, I was using my strengths. I was using skills that I developed. I saw myself being able to tackle things. But Dwight, the thing that probably threw me the most was the fear of failure. Because I think, man, there's no way I can pull this off. There's no way I can do this. And I had a mentor that kept on saying to me over and over again, Larry, you've got the freedom to fail. All failure is for you is you didn't quite make it. So if it doesn't work, dust off the idea and try it again, because you'll come closer to your goal the next time. So failure was not something that I became afraid of. Failure was, okay, we didn't quite get it exactly right. We're going to do this, and this differently. and we're going to come out with a better outcome at the next one. And that was a life-changing experience to realize that no matter what I was doing, I really had the freedom to fail. There was nobody that could say to me, that's wrong, you can't do it that way. It was more of, well, what did you learn from what you just did and how can you make it better? So that became a new byline, for my life, is I've got the freedom to fail. When you were talking about in the introduction, I was assigned a task a few years into that. I'd been becoming quite successful in what we call fundraising. And fundraising in Canada, in the whole world, United States, every place, is generally, and you look at it and watch it, it's an exchange. You give me money and I give you something else. In other words, if it's an animal shelter for helping needy animals, it's you give me money and I'll give you a t-shirt that's got dogs and cats printed on it. Or if you're going to help kids in a hospital, as a result of your gift to the hospital, I'm going to give you a blanket, a cuddly blanket that you can wrap up in at night when you watch television. There's an exchange involved in fundraising. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. Even in golf tournaments, if people go play golf, they're not playing for the cause, they're playing for the opportunity to play golf with probably people they've not played golf before. So the exchange is networking. I'll come, pay $500, play golf, have a good time, and have 2 more leads to work my business tomorrow. And I can run that down the road. So I justify my golfing by the exchange that I'm going to get out of the deal. Now, there's nothing biblically sinful about fundraising. It's just a lot of work. And I watch it all the time. This morning, I had the news on for a few minutes, and it was a major international organization. And they were talking about, for your gift of just X dollars a month, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to send you this. Well, right there was this was, I'll have that little item, that trophy, that award as a result of this exchange. Fund development is very different, Dwight. And that's what I really got into, was the fund development, because now you're helping people relate to the cause in a very different way, where they don't need the exchange. They need the satisfaction that what is important to them is being done. And relationship, yes, it's okay to give gifts in relationships, but you're not motivated by what you're going to get. In fact, sometimes I've had people say, I don't really want this. You can give it to somebody else. I didn't give you the gift for a gift. They gave it because they believed in the cause. And that radically changed my whole mindset. But I had to discover that in a unique way. And it was really off of an assignment that no one ever followed up on. We were in a meeting. I was the low man on the totem pole. I never was the head honcho of running things. I was always the facilitator making it happen. And because I had some success, I was in a meeting, and consultants that were there, we were talking about raising some very significant funding goals. And nobody asked me any questions. I had nothing to really say other than listen to the consultants that were making the presentation. And they're very firm with the organization that if we were going to achieve our goals and objectives, we had to help many thousands of people become generous givers. And they referred to lifestyle stewardship, help them be free to give. Well, it was an argument because the organization really didn't want to start something else. They really needed to raise money. And somebody in the room said, well, let's assign that task over to Larry and see if he can't come up with what is meant by lifestyle stewardship. And I literally wrote down 2 things on the paper, what the topic was. And at the bottom of the yellow pad, I can still see it in my mind, I wrote, Larry, and you've got the freedom to fail. Ironically, Dwight, nobody ever called and asked me how I was coming on that assignment. 8 weeks later, I pulled 4 or 5 guys are in my leadership team together. And I said, I made a commitment, and I think maybe there's something that we need to investigate ourselves, whether the organization wants it or we need it ourselves to be more effective. And that took me into a journey of discovering what's called lifestyle stewardship. And that radically changed everything we did. So rather than hurting and working toward raising small resources we now were raising significant resources with people that had a real vision and a heart to see big things happen. And it was life transforming for me, for my team. I eventually spent 30 years of my life helping other Christian nonprofit organizations lock into some of the same concepts in the context of their organizational goals and objectives. And so, again, that was I sure never expected it, but I sure realized that turning point was transforming me for the rest of my life.
But you got to give
my wife and I. Yeah.
You got to give yourself a pat on the back though, because it may have changed your trajectory, but you still had to be aware of what was going on and then take that leap of faith, because so many people don't understand, right? To have faith that something's going to work out and believe in yourself enough and believe in the people you're going to associate and work with to accomplish the goal you're looking for, right? Your freedom to fail is amazing. That whole go for it, you have the freedom to fail, and you picking up on that and following that is perfect, because so many people quit when they come into their first obstacle in life, right? And then they stay on that same course and path the rest of their life.
And, over and over again, we ran into obstacles. I mean, life did not change. It wasn't smooth sailing from there on out, because the challenge was many people. In fact, I had a major leader a number of years ago. I was trying to help him understand what this lifestyle stewardship thing was all about. And he interrupted me about 15 minutes into our discussion. He said, well, I can appreciate you've got a biblical view, but I don't need another biblical view. I need money. How am I going to raise money? In other words, his goal was not to see it through the eyes of a biblical transaction. He just needed to have people give him money so he could go spend money on his mission. Well, that happened over and over again, because in the nonprofit world, whether it's World Vision or Samaritan's Purse or a Christian college or whatever it is, there's going to be always resistance to another alternative to raising it right. Because tradition, in our religious convictions, tradition trumps a lot of times good theology. And we've always done it this way. I was working with a group in Canada years ago, and I was challenging them on some of the ways they did things, because I could see they were not making progress. And I was cut off pretty abruptly by saying, we've always done it this way, and we will not be changing how we do it. Okay, there was a resistance to even thinking correctly, because they wanted it done the way they've always done it. Now, they wanted me to also create a miracle, take their old ideas that were not working and make them be successful. And we eventually parted company, because I said, you're not prepared to do what it takes to do this right. So I'm going to let you guys go, because you and I are on two different pages. There is a right way and there is an alternative. And I just don't want to spend your money on the alternative. It won't work. So I think there's always resistance. And every time, life is full of resistance. When you have kids, it's an interruption to a really fun time. And then when those kids start to grow, there's more interruptions. And our tradition and our mindset, our theology, a lot of things gets in our way of understanding what really the simplistic way we can approach things in life.
So what kept you through this whole process of you helping people and mentoring nonprofit leaders and trying to help them understand how to do things correctly? You had your own hills and valleys. What kept you passionate throughout this all? Like, you must have had those stories where it was so much of an impactful change that it was enough energy to keep you going. Obviously, God is in our lives and gives us what we need if we're there to accept it. So that would have helped along the process too. But there had to have been something that really kept you passionate to do that for, like you said, 30, 40 years. That's a long time.
Well, I saw enough people's lives changed by what we were starting to teach and how we were coaching them. We not only came up with the principles of lifestyle stewardship, we started having executive weekends where we would teach business leaders the principles that they could apply in their life and in their business. Because there were core biblical foundations. We can get into a few of those, but what I started to see, I think of one guy that came to one of my weekend seminars. He had just retired. He and his wife had retired from their business, had sold their business, and made a very nice pile of cash as a result of that. And they had decided they wanted, in their retirement, they wanted to dedicate themselves to just helping executives learn what they had done in business. So they were wanting to take their business experience and apply it over to helping other business peers and executives. And they came through a 5-hour seminar that I was leading that one morning. And by the time the morning was over, he came up to me right before lunch and he said, you know, we came here with an expectation that you were going to send us off and we could do what you like, what you're doing. He says, but the more I listened to what you were saying, I realized that I was really good as a steward. A steward is not as a manager of somebody else's affairs, Dwight. So it's not a magical word. It just means a steward has always been taking care of somebody else's stuff. And he said, what hit me is I'm a steward of the skills and abilities that I have. And one thing I know is I'm really good at making things work and making money. So he said, I am not going to pursue what I thought I was going to pursue. I'm going back to my home area, and I'm going to start a new business that will not compete with my old business, but I want to give 100% of all the proceeds of my new business to what he called kingdom work. He said, I want to help other people that need money and leverage, and I want to use my ability to help make more money for these enterprises. And it wasn't just one organization. He had a number of organizations that he was quite passionate about. And that's what he did. They went back home. Within a couple of years, the wife that started this off with him died unexpectedly of cancer. He remarried. He worked for another 10 years in developing this business, then sold it for a significant amount of money. And I saw him shortly after that, and he said, you know, I've had a good run of it. I've loved doing this. I feel like I've contributed far more than I ever thought I could, but I still want to go help other peers and executives learn what I've learned. So for the next 5 years, before I can't do it anymore, I want to go do that. Well, I heard more and more stories of transformed people's lives. There was a guy in Canada that was into a very profitable business, living not too far from probably where you're living. And his business was doing phenomenally well. And he was very conservative. He was thinking he would never fly first class. He had plenty of money to do so, but that was a waste. I'll sit in coach because that's where it's cheap. His wife kept saying to him, can't we just sit up front because my legs really hurt back there? And the answer was no, we're going to sit in coach because we don't need to waste the money. But his goal before he died was $100 million given to kingdom work. Well, he exceeded that. And the foundation that he's established continues to give beyond that, because he just saw that his stewardship was being well leveraged when he did what he did well. And I think when I see those kind of stories, and they happen all over the world, you know, I can see stories in pockets around Europe. I can see the same thing happening in Africa. I see people across the United States that really had a transformational experience in understanding their mission. That kept me going for a long time because there's good illustrations of people living that life. And it was maybe a nugget of where they said, okay, I really understand what it's all about and I know what my role is. And when they are on mission in life, life falls into, they even take hardships in a very positive way, because hardships are how you sometimes grow the most in your spiritual life. So they have not looked at this as just a way of making money. They don't even look at it as being attracted by funding. They just see it as, I can do this to help meet my goals and objectives in life. So much of my time was dealt with the people that could give large funds, but many times it was boards and leaders of organizations that aspired to get the money, but were not willing to go through the steps, or if they wanted to go through the steps, Dwight, in developing people is like developing a child. It takes steps and stages in growth and advancement for that to happen. That's what the word development means. So you got a child and he's 4 years of age and he's still working on trying to ride the bicycle without training wheels. You're not going to give him the keys to your car and tell him to go drive, across the country or something. You're going to say he's not ready for that yet. And he's not, because he's got to go through steps and stages in growth and advancement. One of my daughters is a school teacher, and today she's in a class of teaching first graders how to do mathematics. It's one of their first courses that they're going through. They have all their kids show up next Monday, and she'll have 22 first graders. Those first graders are not ready for graduation. It's going to take 12 years before they're ready to even go to college. But the steps and stages in growth along the way are going to help those kids become better and better at what they're doing. And a good teacher is going to jumpstart their learning, and they need to have mentors and teachers along the way. We all need outside coaching to even think right. Otherwise, we just end up thinking within ourselves. And, I believe, part of my role has always been a mentor, a coach, sometimes a pusher and a shover. Sometimes a person says, no, you're doing it wrong. We got to go rewind the clock and do it differently. And those are hard things sometimes for people in leadership to take, because they don't like to have a person that says you're doing it wrong, or we got to do this differently if you want to see the success you want. But my role is to help them think through those things, and then help them in many cases mold a strategy around the core principles that's unique to their organization, the DNA of what they've created. And a private Christian school and a World Vision or Samaritan's Purse are two different animals completely. But at the base of all those, if you're doing the right things, you can be successful in doing that, or a soup kitchen that's helping people with nightly meals. The bottom line is the same if they do it correctly. So I've learned to do that over the years, and I've been I'm continually challenged by, yes, there's people out there that when they see who they really are, they can start thriving in life. In fact, the reason I wrote Intentional Living and Giving, about 3 years ago, I was in Ireland with a group of Europeans. I was the only American there. We were having a celebration. I stayed on for 3 or 4 days for kind of the staff retreat of the organization that I was working with. And somebody mentioned it's so hard to find content that helps people understand what lifestyle stewardship is. It's hard to find it because some of it's very deceptive content out there, or you think you're into it and it's not really the content you wanted. And I left Northern Ireland thinking it's time for me to go back and rewind the clock and put it into a guidebook of what those core principles are, so that anybody around the world can connect with those principles and become successful regardless of the cultural dynamics that you work with. So that's how I even put the book together. But the key thing in the book was the word intentional. Now, Living and Giving is in the book's title, and it's big and bold. But intentional says, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to be careful in how I'm doing life. And I'm going to choose to do things every day that's going to get me where I want to go. And I'm not going to get in a bumper car at the carnival. I'm not going to get jarred around. I'm going to be intentional in thinking about what it's going to take for me to live a life of purpose. And that becomes a life of thriving, because once you know what your purpose is, you'll start to thrive. But many people, I met them in college, I met them at all ages, they really don't know what their purpose is.
No, they don't even have to be in college. I'm going to interrupt you so we can start going a different direction before we run out of time. But so many people don't know what they want, like you said, and they need direction and purpose. They don't want to be in that bumper car going, bouncing all over the place. But, with your book itself, when you wrote that book, what did it do for you? And what I mean by that is when I wrote my book, it was very cathartic. It helped me discover things that I knew, but I hadn't really shared, or it helped me discover where I should have patted myself in the back on a journey I had gone through. Though there was failure at the end, which was a catalyst to something else. I never really appreciated that journey. So writing my book over the 5.5 months that took me before it was published, I looked at the fact of like, what did I do this for? Why did I do this? Should I be kicking myself in the pants because I should have caught it sooner? And I'm only catching it now as I'm putting it to print? Or should I be patting myself on the back, right? What did your book do for you personally?
Well, there was a journey. Yes, you can say I'm the author, but if it wasn't for 5 or 6 guys that worked with me 35 years ago, we never would have formulated the content.
Okay.
Now, because I have a theater arts background, I was working with, all the guys owned it. We all were transformed in the process. Our families were. We started seeing life different. We changed the name of what we were doing from fundraising to fund development. We no longer had donors. We had partners that wanted to do equal things. Partnership is holding hands and doing it together. It changed everything we did, and we became more and more and more successful. That doesn't mean we were writing, that our names were in lights. It meant that we were seeing good outcomes. And then we decided, well, we've learned it. We should teach it to others. So we created seminars. We created opportunities for people to come and check boxes and write in notebooks and things of that nature. But it was still probably 8 years later before I wrote another book called Giving Yourself Away, that were still around the same concepts, because that was where we were starting to put it into writing. It was no longer just a short article in a magazine. It was no longer just a seminar. I have a real strong conviction on many things about what it does to put things in writing. And if the key phrase there I use all the time, if it's not in writing, it does not exist. And so when you put it in writing, it lets you start to edit what you actually wrote. Probably writing the book is one thing, and editing the book before it ever went to the editor for you, Dwight, was probably painful, because you kept sharpening it up. And as you let pages lay there, you came back and you're saying, that's really not what I meant. This is what I would like to say differently. So the writing of the book became if I can put it in writing, it does exist. Now, it could happen in other formats. We can talk about it on a podcast. I could do it in television. I could do, all kinds of things with it. But the fact that it's in writing, we've refined it. And that helped me probably a great deal figuring out how do you say it, because in print, it lasts forever. Whereas in a speech, if you don't take good notes, you can change your mind on it. Nobody ever know you said it. And the only place you find where they do say it is political statements that came out 5 years ago and you were 180 degrees from what you're saying now. That happens in politics circles a lot. But yes, the development of the book was painful in some ways, because it caused me to really think. Was this really what we said? Was this really the way it worked? And what I did in this book here, as I worked on it more recently, I'm thinking, okay, many people want to get to the core theology, the basics of what is, in this case, what's a lifestyle stewardship? What's the core principles? In another generation, I could have sprinkled all kinds of how-tos all over the place. But in intentional living and giving, it's 9 pages about what the theology is. What is the core beliefs of this? And then the next 9 chapters is, how do I live this life? What's the practicalities of implementation? I've got a whole chapter on how not to be deceived, because a steward can be deceived really quickly by good salesmen. Okay, so if you want to not be deceived, you got not to know who are the deceivers, because that would change my culture. If I could list out 10 deceivers in North America, many people would recognize them. But if you took those same deceivers' names to Africa, nobody would recognize them. There would be another list of names that are very popular in Africa, but they're still deceivers. So rather than talking about names, I decided to talk about principles of identifying deception. Now, there's people that write much more on deception than I write, But in one chapter, I can help a person start to put his antenna up and say, this is not true. And in this day and age with AI, everything else going out there, you've got to be pretty sharp to know when you're being hooked. But I want a steward to know when he can be taken and start to make wise decisions against deception that's going to hit him. I wrote a whole chapter on money just because people think stewardship equals money. So yeah, let's spend one whole chapter on how money relates to it. But I also remind them there's 100 other things to give besides money. So a steward.
But our society, though, our society today is so focused on money. So I'm going to interrupt you so we can, unpack some of this stuff about your book, because we're going to run out of time here. I know in my book, I talk very little bit about money, even though I'm a financial planner for going to be 23 years as the next month.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we look at the impact that we have on people and their focus on money. So you having one chapter out of all the chapters just about money, because I wrote this as one of the things I wanted to discuss, having that one chapter for money, people may be like, why? You're all about intentional living and giving, and this is supposed to be helping us generate money. But what they don't realize is what you're talking about. That 6 inches between their ears needs to be developed so they don't get deceived, like you're saying, by, I call them scammers, whatever, deceivers, whatever you want to call them, whatever $20 word we decide to choose. These people need to have a shield against what I call evil, people that are out to deceive and take advantage of us. Happens our whole lives, from when we're young to when we're, we finally pass away. Somebody's always in it for the buck, but if we can teach them how to be there for their mission and following core values, money will come. So it really made sense when I was reading that about you, that you only had one chapter about money, because really the rest of it, your philosophy is to grow and help and change people's thought processes. And by changing that, the money will come, correct?
That's basically it. Money is one of 100 things that anybody can give. Now, in the New Testament, there's two different. Well, there's the Bible's full of it. You got Solomon on one side, probably the wealthiest guy, would maybe trump Elon Musk and his money. Wealth and wisdom were all over the place in Solomon's era, and God blessed him for a lot of that kind of stuff. But Jesus was in the temple at age 31, 32 years of age, and sees a lady come in and put 2 cents in the offering plate. And he commented that she's given more than everybody else in the building. Well, there was wealth all over the place, and she walked in with 2 pennies. It's not the amount that really makes the difference. It's the attitude of what's behind that amount. It's what that lady wanted to see happen as a result. She wanted to give it, and she gave it as a free will gift. She was not giving her tithe. She gave it all. The Old Testament's got this concept of tithing. It's popular all over, at least North America and other parts of the world. And we think if we can get people up to 10%, we've really arrived. And I'm thinking, no, first of all, you got a misunderstanding. The Old Testament was not 10%. It was a tithe twice a year and a third tithe every other year. So it was 27% basically of the tithe. It just was, he had to give it in 10% lumps. And that's what the tithe was all about. And it was for the theocracy. It was the federal income tax of the Jewish people at the time. All the money went to the Levites. They were the only group of the children of Israel that did not have property. So they were required to give money so they could fund an entire tribe of people. So they were a theocracy that covered their money. They covered widows and orphans. They covered the management of the government. That's what the money was going for. That was the federal income tax. Well, I think when people start to realize in something like money that we have manipulated ourselves to believe a certain thing. I mean, there's a culture out there that says, if you give to me, God's going to bless you more than you ever been blessed. Well, that's manipulation. You don't know what God's choosing to do with you. He's promised he's going to take care of you and meet your needs, some of your wants, and probably a lot more of your desires. But you've got to understand the bigger picture before you start just playing with money. I'm a big champion on Crown Financial Concepts or Compass or Peace University with Dave Ramsey here in the United States. Great places to learn how to manage money. But if you're skipping over the core of what we really are as stewards, then you're just looking for technique to get yourself out of trouble. And the technique's not gonna last a long time. If you're looking for the lifestyle of who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, then it can override, and it impacts the money, but it also impacts their attitude about doing everything. So I'm more interested in helping a lifestyle shift that encompasses money, but encompasses the time, the talent, the treasure of whoever is walking into this arena. And then financial planning becomes really important to the steward because he wants to maximize it, rather than it's a technique where I can put more money in my bank, which is also going to happen if you do it right. So I think the reason I focus on the principles behind it, and in the book there's only 5 principles, but they're principles that are biblical, but they're principles that we don't always connect together. We often see them in the buffet table. It's the dessert and it's the meat and it's the vegetables, and they're so spread out we don't realize them, that they could be all tied together into a complete meal. So the book outlines the 5 principles of lifestyle stewardship. And once you start to say, okay, that's who I am, and that's how I connect with my Heavenly Father, and that's what he designed us to be stewards in the first place. If you're going to go back to Genesis 2, it's a story of Adam and Eve. Why is it there? It says that God walked in the evenings with them and he had a relationship with them, but he assigned them to do one thing. And that was basically, in my vernacular, take care of my stuff and go name the animals. You got the freedom to be a manager of what I've created, and it's up to you. Now, they blew it pretty big time. And by Genesis 3, you saw self-serving coming in. They were affected differently. And the rest of the entire Bible, if you look at it from that way, is getting this mess cleaned back up. And then how do we live? And the book of much of the letters in the New Testament is how do you practically live every day? And if you're picking up the principles of stewardship, you're going to live it as an honor to who owns it all in the first place. So it is, money is a part of it, but an attitude is even more core than the money by far. Money, yes, I was helping raise resources and money for Christian nonprofits, but the attitude of how we saw those people changed a lot in many of those places, because now we were dealing with a steward that was entrusted with resources. How can we help him wisely invest those resources where he feels is going to make the biggest difference? And I've had it's interesting to watch an organization, and I saw it happen more than one occasion, where we would be dealing with somebody and we were talking about a gift to our particular cause. And then a person says, well, I'm less interested in that, but I'm really interested in this. And then the person that's doing the talking says, let me make a few phone calls and introduce you to this other organization that does what you're really interested in doing. I think maybe that's where your interest is more than us, because I want to help you be successful in what you think God calls you to do. And we don't need the money. We want to see you become prescriptively more effective yourself. And that is life-changing for the steward, because he's hearing somebody says, your need and your mission is more important than what I think our mission is. And that's giving it away. And I've seen many times where people say, let me introduce you to so-and-so. They do this over here. That's what you said was really your heart and soul. That's helping people. I'm not, the supply is going to come when we are doing what we're supposed to do. And I just learned in my case, Dwight, my mission was I started to understand something and I wanted to pass it on to other people. So I'm still, even in my older age, I'm still saying I've still got time to pass it on and help other people. I want people to thrive, not just survive.
And really, yes, a person should be doing that until the day they take their last breath. If we're a servant, and we believe God put us on this planet to serve and support others and direct them where they truly need to be, maybe we're not the person, we're their initial contact, and we're not the person to help them, but we distribute our knowledge and network to help and build them in stewardship, right? So people just
Yeah.
don't get it. They sit in a cocoon of life and they say to themselves, I'm not going to share this information. It took me forever to get here. What happens if they steal wealth from me? They steal money from me. They rob opportunity from me, instead of thinking to yourself, well, their circle and my circle may overlap a little bit, but they have their own people. By me supporting them, I'm serving God's purpose for me to serve others and to continually grow and make people live purpose and with intent, right? My whole mission is helping people live life on purpose and not by accident. Too many people that you and I meet are living by accident because too many people
That's,
didn't say, hey, I can help you. I've gone through this. Here's my school of hard knocks, which was 8 years. I'm going to help you do it in 2, 3, because I'm going to mentor you and
I
help
can,
you not make the same mistakes.
yeah, my view is if I can help you get the principles down, I can jumpstart your realignment and thinking. And then when
Exactly.
we start to help them in their realignment, you know, the book is just a print edition of something that's a strong conviction. But it's also something that, for instance, grandparents can give the book to the Z generation kids. They may be concerned about how they're thinking, how they're wasting money, different things, but maybe they're not the ones to preach, but can say, this book really transformed my thinking. This can really help you. This could be the answer to your direction. It could be a gift in that regard because you're helping teach solid principles and you're helping connect the hoses. And then you're also helping them. Another chapter, Dwight, shows you what happens is how do you as a steward make good decisions and even saying no to worthy causes. When I say no to something in my church that they really want me to volunteer for, and I'm doing that in these days, and I'm saying no, that's something that somebody else can do. I'll help you do this part of it, but I'm not going to do this part anymore. That's learning to use my time and my resources wisely against an agenda. So, I think if we start to teach people to think right, it's going to help solve a lot of their other issues. They're going to want financial planning as a means of leveraging their assets, not just a technique to protect their kids. I mean, the techniques are all important. I believe that a lot of those techniques are really solid. I'm big for those things, but I want the people before they get to the technique to start to realize this is why the technique is so important to me. And so it becomes it's a life cycle. It's a way of living. And when I got into this 35 years ago, my wife and I dove into it together. We started realizing this is transformational. We were very generous in giving, but now the lid was off. I do my income tax in the United States, and every year I get red flagged that you're giving too much money away, because there's indicators in the system that say this guy's giving too much. No, I'm giving it because it's a way of me leveraging my life into the future. And I realized that I could be audited because I'm giving too much. Well, that's kind of a fun reason. That's a nice reason to be audited, I guess. I have never been audited, but I know that's a liability because of what I'm doing. But it transformed our life to the point in some of our most difficult times. It didn't change where we were going and gave us renewed vision. A decade ago, Dwight, my wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. Now, a glioblastoma is almost a death threat. It is called the terminal disease of the brain. And anybody that has a glioblastoma, they may get 4 months to 14 years, but you're going to die of a glioblastoma sooner or later. There's very rare cases of a person that ever overcame glioblastoma. Okay, that meant that 10 years ago, she changed addresses on me. Did that change what my mission was? No, it was a little upsetting. I lost my best friend after 45 years, and you can call that'd be a jar in my life, But what it really did is I went back about a month or two later and I said, okay, Pat's moved for her new home, new address. I know where she's at. I haven't lost her. It just changed in addresses. What am I going to do? And again, I came back to the principle. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so I said, okay, I'm going to rewrite the wills I will do. And I got 10 I wills that I live by. And I got 12 commitments that I live by. Now, I don't go to them every single day, but 2 or 3 times a year, I go back to what I wrote and ask myself, is that still in line with where I want to go? And right now, for instance, I will spend time with 6 grandkids in meaningful ways where I can leave an imprint on their life. Okay, I've got to work on that throughout the year because a 10-year-old requires different kind of time from grandpa than a 22-year-old. And so I look for things. I've got a Down syndrome 18-year-old daughter that's got significant limitations. It's very different than her 14-year-old sister that has no limitations. So I've got to be thinking all the time. Part of my will is I will influence those kids as long as I can influence them. So this afternoon, I'm leaving to spend time with 2 of my grandkids for 3 days. Now, their parents are going to be there, but I want them to know that I took time away so that we're going to do something fun for 2 or 3 days before they go back to school. Now, they're not going to be sitting back there thinking, oh, I wonder what grandpa's really up to, because they just like being with me. But part of it is because I show up often and I do things like that. That is my stewardship. My lifestyle stewardship is to influence their thinking and help them with the next season of life. I'm writing a book called Intentional Reflections. It's a book that will never get printed, but it will probably be printed and read by the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and people. What was grandpa like? Because I can leave that behind for them. And I don't plan, it's not a book that I'm rushing to get printed, although I'm having fun writing it. And I'm writing it the same way I wrote Intentional Living and Giving. I mean, I'm into it periodically with chapters and everything else like that. But the intention for that is to help the next generation understand lifestyle stewardship and what made grandpa and grandma unique and how they influenced who they knew and who they did. So it's a plan and it's a will that I choose to do. And intentionality means I've got to work on that probably a little bit every week to keep that going. It's not something I work on every 3 or 4 years. And then the commitments are, okay, I've got to schedule time to do those kind of things. And so the commitment is more of a tactic of how I implement the I wills. I just think that people can live with great peace and comfort if they just know where they're going. And it becomes a fun life because I've enjoyed every minute of my life. Even some of the more painful parts can be enjoyed. And joy is an attitude of the heart. It's not mean that I'm happy with everything, because happiness is all circumstantial and environmentally around me. The joy comes internally. And I get great joy of watching people get the idea and doing it. So I just think anybody can live this way, Dwight. I'm pretty simplistic in it. If I can just help you get onto the right roadmap, you're going to end up with giving yourself away over and over and over again.
That's awesome. So we're going to wrap up the show. I got one last quick question for you here.
Yeah.
Larry, if you had to give our listeners one final message that proves it's always worth it to give a heck about their lives, what would that message be?
I would say that if they learn to be a lifestyle steward, they're going to transform everybody's life that they touch. So it's going to multiply and impact. And I would like to see people, first of all, learn the principles, but then begin to influence people with those principles. I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
That's
Live
awesome.
the life God's planned you.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate
it. Dwight, anybody can get a hold of the book. You can go to your favorite book outlet and get it. It's Larry Onan's book, Intentional Living and Giving. And, that's the best way to get it. In fact, if people really wanted to, they could go to larryonan.com, and if they like digital editions of books, you go to my website and now you can download a free copy of the entire book and start reading it right now. It's available.
That's great. I was just about to ask you that. For those new to Give a Heck, whether you're watching or listening, I'll give you an easy way to go. Just go to giveaheck.com, go to the top, hit podcast, and you'll see a picture of Larry along with all his social media, whatever he's connected to, if he is connected to it, but a website, as well as, detailed summaries of the show, as well as the full unedited transcript if you're a person that likes to go and read or find specific areas of the conversation that we had today. So I appreciate you being on, Larry. Any last final comments before I close up the show?
I'm just wanting people to have a good time being free. So go for it, man.
That's right.
Pick up on the concepts. Go for it. Go for it, man.
Exactly. So you don't need wealth to live generously. You don't need fame to leave a legacy. All you need is clarity, courage, and commitment to start. You have been entrusted with something, your story, your talents, your mission. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start small, start sincerely, but start. Always give a heck. This was a great conversation with Larry, a man whose stewardship legacy continues to wake people up to what they're capable of. From faith to finances and mission to meaning, his journey reminds us that clarity does not come from control, it comes from trust. If this episode moved you, share it with a friend, a dreamer, a nonprofit leader, or someone who needs to reconnect with the calling of their life. Because purpose doesn't wait, and generosity is a decision. Choose it boldly, choose it faithfully, and remember, at the end of the day, it's never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.